Information alone is not enough. This can't just be top-down where you put out press releases. There has to be an ongoing two-way communication, much like the model of these dialogues. That has to be extended, possibly on a different scale, but we need to keep doing that. A longer vision, a broader, more sustainable 5-year vision or a 10-year vision, something that will last beyond any particular administration. The school district budget has got to be a part of the discussions. People pay one check, they find some of the distinctions a little arbitrary. And so when you talk about the municipal budget versus the school budget discussion, there needs to be real clarity about how that conversation unfolds. And going beyond the usual suspects. It is hard to get a broadly diverse, totally representative group involved in these discussions, but we have to continue to try to reach out to people who maybe can't come to a 3-hour meeting on a Wednesday night because they have children or they're working a couple of jobs. How do you get to people who can't normally participate? We've got to continue to innovate around that. Have to create and tell a story of a new era of efficiency and accountability, and two-way communication. So talking about what efficiency gains have been made, what incentives there are to improve departmental efficiency, and to report in an ongoing fashion about those improvements, and importantly, how public feedback is impacting the decisions that the administration is making. If those steps are taken, then in parallel or in sequence, then you can have a discussion about possibly adding revenues to the mix. But without taking those steps, it's going to be a tough discussion to have. And then just in conclusion, there's a great opportunity here to engage the public in designing and implementing solutions. These conversations were a starting point. They're really a window of opportunity. The feedback was extremely positive. We asked people, did they think the materials were helpful, the discussions helpful, and did it impact their thinking? More than 80 or 90% answered yes to all 3 of those questions. In particular, the discussion was seen as tremendously helpful. The opportunity to talk to their fellow Anchorageites about what they thought, to learn different opinions, to see the project, the problem from a different lens. People found 93% or something along those lines found very useful. That's really something to pay attention to. So it's a chance to start an ongoing conversation about efficiency and good government, and the residents of Anchorage are eager to engage, and they're ready to face up to these tough choices.
Thank you, Heidi. Questions for Heidi? We're off easy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I talked too fast.
Well, thank you. And Heidi and her team did a great job, and I can't imagine a more a perfect leader of these kind of dialogues. I think everybody responded very well to you and your team, obviously very engaging and able to draw out people and make them feel comfortable in that setting, which was very, very important. And the other thing that we take from it immediately as an administration is that it really reinforces some of the initiatives we've already started. Literally many months ago, from the first day we took office, we've been looking at ways to find efficiencies in government, and then to hear that from the public that this is one of their top priorities as well, kind of reinforces those efforts. And just as an example, we've just reorganized our community planning and development organization into a more streamlined structure that has 2 key elements, the planning department and the public works department. It's going to save the city over $650,000 every year. And so that's an example of what we're doing in every department to not try and make sure that we can maintain service, but at the same time do it more efficiently. And so really it shows that we're on the right track, at least as far as what the public perceives as well, the way government can do business better. We agree, and again, that's going to be one of our main focuses for the next several years. So with that, any questions about the Viewpoint Learning Dialogue? Rosemary.
I have a couple questions. You mentioned the efficiencies, taking a message from this report. What about the don't cut libraries, the bus system, public health, and also what about the excise tax on alcohol?
What about them?
What kind of messages are you taking away from that?
Well, what the report said was what it said, that people don't want to see very small budgets particularly impacted greatly in efforts to balance a budget. But that doesn't mean that any of those departments can't find efficiencies too. Libraries, for example, a lot of them are going to more automated functions in terms of book sorting and getting them back into the collections and stuff, and we're behind the curve on that. It takes some investment to do it. And then same thing, transit, we've instituted some new efficiency measures just in the last few months with the bus preemption devices that allow the green lights to stay green a little longer so the buses can stay on schedule. And when you're a bus service in a winter city, you don't want people standing out at a bus stop any longer than possible. So every department can find efficiencies, but we heard the message too that that's not particularly where they want us to balance the budget because they are such small portions of the overall budget.
And will you make any decisions based on your 2011 budget based on those observations?
I think it is part of the mix, if you will. This is a very valid set of data and comments from the public, and you know, part of our job as elected officials is to listen to the public. So yes, it'll have an impact.
And will you consider an alcohol excise tax? We don't have one, right?
We don't, and there's still, I guess, some dispute about, we're having legal review whether or not it would actually be considered an alcohol sales tax, because the state legislature, as I understand it, there are statutes that refer to alcohol taxes of this nature that they would be considered a sales tax. So I'm not sure that that's exactly an option for us yet, that it might actually have to go to a vote of the people and be subject to the 60% vote requirement.
If it is an option, is it something you'd consider for this fall?
Well, again, it'd be part of the dialogue with the Assembly. I mean, they would have to take the first action to even put something like that on the ballot if it needs to go to the public. So first step would be to engage the Assembly in discussion. Yes?
I do, maybe you can help me understand a little bit more. I understand the value of, you know, opening up these type of dialogues, but I mean, do you think in the tough times we're having with the budgets, was it worth, in your opinion, paying about $50,000 when people can come to Assembly meetings for free?
Sure. At the Assembly meeting, you know, if you come to a public hearing, for example, you get 3 minutes. And that really is not an ample time to get into in-depth dialogue, to really consider options. And most of the people that will show up are basically advocating for, don't cut my spending, quite frankly. So I think it was valuable, particularly since the public sector, or the private sector, contributed greatly to the cost of this. As Heidi mentioned, you've got Northrim Bank, First National Bank, Rasmussen Foundation, you had the school district and the Embassy Suites donate facilities. So yeah, I think the cost, the municipal portion was de minimis in terms of the results and the interaction that we gained from it.
How much did the community spend?
What was our share, Cheryl?
25,000.
25.
Yeah.
Christine?
I know you're waiting for the findings of the study to come out in order to present your spending plan. What are some of the points that kind of surprised you or really took your attention?
It was interesting in that, again, I mean, a lot of times when you go to public hearings or certain community council meetings, people will absolutely, there's sometimes the same people at every meeting, and some of the services they don't use, like bus service or maybe some health and human services, they think those should be the first ones to go away. But then you get into the more engaged dialogue with a more representative sample, and the results were different than what we oftentimes hear out of certain more vocal groups. And then the other one that was surprising was that the large budget items, which are typically considered sacrosanct, like the police department and maintenance and operations, were ones where the public clearly said at every dialogue they thought there could be greater efficiencies. And one of the examples that was used quite often, in fact, at every dialogue, was there's a fender bender and 5 police cars show up. And so the question was, do they have that much unallocated time that they can respond to a fender bender in such numbers, type of thing. And that's anecdotal, but it was prevalent throughout every dialogue. So as Heidi mentioned, sometimes just the perception of something, whether it's even as dramatic money-wise or true or not, is as strong as maybe the actual facts of the matter. So it's something that we'll take into consideration as we look at our budget.
Kirsten?
I know the Assembly, their first work session on this is going to be in roughly 2 weeks, and we're just getting the final report in now. So practically, I mean, how much of this do you think you're going to be able to incorporate into your budget, since it's really, there's not a whole lot of time before we go into it?
Well, I mean, if you look at it, there's not specific budget recommendations. It's more general discussion about how the community feels about certain services, about certain taxes. And having sat through the dialogues with my staff, and having had the draft in hand for a bit, we've had time to really digest quite a bit of it, actually. So we've still got a couple of weeks before we present the budget to the Assembly, and then there's several months worth of process after that. So I don't think we'll have too much problem absorbing the material and, where appropriate, incorporating some of the suggestions into our budget dialogue.
Anyone else?
Then end on that topic, but if anybody has any questions about last night's Assembly meeting, clearly there was actions taken at the meeting last night. If anybody has any questions, gladly try and respond. If not, Thank you all for coming.